All right, welcome back to the Founder-Led Marketing Show. I'm here with Jeff Whitlock, who is the CEO at Grain, which is a conversation intelligence software that helps you automate note-taking, record-keeping, and insight capture so that you and your team can spend time where it matters most. Jeff, thank you for joining.
Thank you. Happy to be here, Finn.
I wanted to start with the fact that it looks like you had a relatively unconventional path to becoming the CEO of this company. You, at least according to your LinkedIn profile, and they say don't trust everything you read on the internet, is that you started out as the head of operations, then moved to head of product, then moved to president, and now since a couple months, you're the CEO of this company. One, is that true? And two, can you maybe expand a little bit on that trajectory and how it went down?
Yeah, it's true. In fact, it's funny you point that out because I should probably just clean up the narrative on LinkedIn a little bit. I mean, it is true. In startups, things are pretty flexible and you kind of move around. Which so that the title president just seems kind of silly to me, but that was really just kind of what we were doing while I was transitioning to take over the CEO role. But yeah, no, I joined Grain. My startup actually merged with Grain a while back after this Grain raised its Series A. I knew the founder CEO pretty well, and we just thought like, hey, we can probably, our shops were working on similar things. And so we said, hey, we can probably have more success doing this together than competing, or at least, going our separate ways, a better way to say it. And then, so I kind of joined, just said, I'll come in and help wherever I'm needed. And so I kind of just like moved through the startup, helping in different places needed. And then eventually Mike came to me, great guy, just really wants to build a good business, and was like, hey, I think you'd be a better CEO than me. And, I want you to take on this role. And so it was nothing dramatic. We just decided to let me step into the role.
Interesting. So I guess I'm curious. I guess you were running your own company before that, so it's not like you came from a product background, or you were head of product at a bit different company. But I'm just curious, are there any lessons now, having gone through that transition of different stages, and now that you're the CEO, any like lessons that stood out to you that you had to learn to adapt to this new role that you're currently in?
I mean, you're always learning how to be a better leader in whatever role you're in. I had been the CEO before at my previous startup. Obviously, it was smaller. So I think the main thing that I've been trying to get better at is go to market strategy, and then getting leverage and trying to not try to use my time in very high value ways, basically, and not get sucked into everything. And, I think good leaders always have to get in the weeds. It's just a question of like, which weeds do you get into? Because if you get into too many weeds, then you become very low leverage and not effective. But if you are very selective in picking the right areas to get into that are high leverage and needed for the business, I think it's really important to understand the details and get into the weeds, as they say.
Can you give, like, just so people have context when we have this conversation, a rough range on where you guys are in terms of revenue, just so people can place you on where you are in that trajectory of growth?
Yeah. So we're like in the, if you kind of, I've seen the standard bucketing. It's like, in SaaS, it's like 0 to a million, then million to 10 million, and then, 10 million to 20 or 100 million. So we're in the $1 to $10 million, journey.
Cool. Makes total sense. So given that phase, how would you describe your current main priorities, or what are the weeds that you're currently getting yourself into?
Growth, go to market. We have a really good product. Obviously, it can always be better. I think our market's pretty competitive, so we're still trying to always claw for some differentiation. And that's where my focus historically has been a lot. But now our numbers look really good. Our NRR looks good. Our conversion rates have improved substantially. And so now we're just really trying to get a better top of funnel motion that we know that can get more attention.
Right. And so from the website, it looks like you guys run a pretty classic PLG freemium model, where you have a free tier, and then you have a $15 per seat per month package, and then basically $30 per seat per month package. And then you also have the enterprise, which is just, talk to us, book a demo. Now, when you think about go to market, like, where are you focusing? Is it focusing on bringing in more SME customers through that product-led motion? Is it trying to move up market and actually closing some, mid-market or enterprise deals? Like, how are you thinking about this?
We're trying to get more people to our landing page, basically. And, we have product-led is a bit of a fuzzy term. We have a casual, what we call a casual contact motion, which is people see grain in the wild, they see it on their calls, they ask about it, their friends talk about it. So we do have a casual contact motion, which is like people bump into the product in the wild, and then that does drive signups. But we definitely need a sort of a marketing motion on top of that. It's not necessarily a viral enough product. It's not like TikTok or whatever, where it's like hyper viral, where you can just use that. Yeah, unfortunately, where you can just use that as your main growth. Like it's a solid loop for us, and it is the foundation of our growth. But we're looking to sort of build the motion on top of that to kind of to explain things.
So when you say you want more kind of people hitting a landing page, is there any segment that you're focusing on? Because I know, at least it looks like from your, say again.
More of our ICPs to hit our landing page.
So who's that? SMBs, mid market. I also see that different departments can use grain, sales, product, customer success. Any of those that you're trying to focus on, or is it just we want more startups to hit our page and then figure out how they can use it?
Yeah. So I mean, the thing that we've learned when it comes to conversational intelligence is it spreads, but sales has most of is usually the people that bring it in. So we're really focused on sales teams, startup to mid market, basically. But we acknowledge that like our product still needs to work okay for the product managers and the customer success people, and that's part of that kind of focusing on the mid market. That is part of just the reality of not playing in the enterprise. In the enterprise, it's like Gong, for example, is one of our competitors. They're even them. It's funny. We'll still see product managers get Gong licenses, which is really surprising to me because it's just so expensive for the basic use case that they're using it for. But Gong is much more vertically oriented. And that's fine because they're enterprise. But we've just seen in the mid market, sales teams will pick up grain. Then the product manager's like, oh, I want to be recording my call for research, and then success. Sometimes even in the mid market, success is under the CRO, so they're basically even the same buyer in some ways. So we're very focused on sales, but we want to make it a simple enough and easy enough to use product that other people can adopt it. And that's why you see we have those two tiers. We have the starter tier and the business tier. The business tier is really for sales teams. Starter tier is for product managers, customer success, other use cases. And so we kind of allow people to mix and match and depending on the use case.
So when you think about, mid-market and kind of sales department being the ICP, I think about, go-to-market motions or channels or campaigns as like 3 stages. The first one is like it's validated, it's working, we have verified that it's scalable and we're just hammering it. The second one is we're seeing some positive signals and now we're kind of exploring. And then the third one is just we're experimenting here. We really have no data whether it's working or not. We just kind of have a sense that we should be playing here. So I'm curious.
When you say it there, are you talking about the
motion, the channel, the campaign? So I'm curious. You're already at that stage where you have customers, you're scaling up. What are the channels that get you to this point? So what are the things that are working for you guys right now that maybe you can share?
Like I said, this kind of core product-led casual contact motion is really what the foundation is.
So it's just literally word of mouth, people kind of seeing you out in the wild and then checking it out?
Yeah. We see word of mouth different as casual contact. Word of mouth is, you and I are grabbing a drink and I say, oh, grain's cool. Whereas casual contact's like you see grain in the context of it being used and therefore it, but yes, that's our primary motion. And then obviously we do have some content SEO that works for us a bit too.
How did you get those early though? Because for that to gain momentum and people to actually see grain out in the wild, you need to have, a decent enough base that enough people actually see it so they can check it out. How did you get the first early kind of people to start using it?
A lot of networks. I mean, there's like the first, several hundred customers, couple thousand. A lot of it was just sort of telling our friends about it, getting published on some, like we were on some big blogs early days. We got some press. So we did a lot of things that kind of, I wouldn't say were super repeatable to just get ourselves out in the world.
Right. That makes sense. Okay. And then what are the kind of next stage here? What are maybe some channels that are not, fully built out, but you're seeing some good signals there? It's working. It's maybe not at scale yet. Are there any kind of channels or campaigns that come to mind that you guys are running there?
Yeah, I'd say I'm just in the very early days of figuring this out. This became my priority just a couple weeks ago. Where, like I said, I mentioned I kind of shifted from focusing on product to focusing on top of funnel. But given the market we're playing in, like a non-enterprise, you have to find some kind of scalable, low-cost acquisition channel, which narrows your options. Like SDR outbound, sales outbound is probably not going to work. So we're really focused on variations of content. Yeah, I can tell you more about the details of what I'm trying to figure out, but that's basically what we're trying to figure out.
This is what the podcast is about, so I'm happy to dive into some experiments here, or what you're thinking about.
Yeah, what I'm really trying to figure out is this. People call it different things, but we call it a KOL strategy, like a key opinion leader strategy. And basically what that means is like trying to find not big influencers in the sales space or not big thought leaders. Cause there's huge people out there like Jason Lemkin or whatever that are just massive. We know those people are going to want to work with us. Yeah, exactly. But we want to find people Chris Walker. We want to find people sort of are kind of the tier down. They have 5 to maybe 20,000 followers on LinkedIn. They're trying to build a presence and they're working on it hard. And so in people in that, we think they'd want to partner. So we're trying to figure out exactly what motivates those types of people, what type of content do they want to collaborate on with us with, and how to structure it. So that's what I'm in the early days of figuring out.
Yeah. Just for context for people, KOL, I would just describe as B2B influencer marketing. Are you looking within your existing customer base, or are you going out fishing into the market, people who have maybe never heard of Grain, but they have an audience of salespeople, and so you're trying to approach them cold? What are you thinking there?
A little bit of both. We're experimenting with both.
And then, in my opinion, the only way that this works in B2B, and I'm curious to get your reaction on it, is to the classic B2C thing. And even in B2C influencer marketing, you see it shifting away from these like one-off product shout outs where it's like Kim Kardashian mentions like this product once, right? And you get a bunch of traffic, versus you're really partnering with a creator who shares your values and approaches, and they really believe in what you sell in your product. And so it's an ongoing campaign where like it's a year-long, 2-year-long, 3-year-long partnership where they keep talking about you and your product. Is this kind of what you guys are thinking about, or more like one-off kind of product shout-outs?
Definitely what you just said. I don't one-off product shout-outs don't matter. It's not going to be scalable. You're not going to repeat it. It's definitely more of like a partnership. And I would say that a couple of things I would edit just a little bit from what you said is, and how we're thinking about it is, it's not about just like shouting out our product or talking about us. It's about creating very valuable content together for kind of demand creation awareness, and occasionally linking that to our product.
Right. And being associated with you guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Almost like a brand ambassador.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And then what platforms are you looking at? Like LinkedIn, Twitter, podcasts, YouTube creators? Like what is most relevant to you guys?
All the above. But I would say, well, I think that the obvious one is LinkedIn, right? That's where I think it's really still, I mean, obviously it's less the case, but I still think it's underappreciated as a content demand creation platform. I don't think it's great at demand capture, and I don't think I think LinkedIn could do a lot better if they wanted to at that. But I still think for general like awareness and demand creation, I think it's a really good platform. The thing that's interesting is I think we're trying to, it's the ones that we're less sure about, but I think are interesting to us are, short form video on TikTok and Instagram. I think a lot of people don't see those as being as much of a B2B channel, but we're all on those platforms. And so I don't know. That's one that's like, we're not as focused on, but it's one that I'm interested in kind of experimenting with down the road.
And then I'm curious, in terms of incentivizing or compensating these KOLs or ambassadors or influencers, however you want to call them, how are you thinking about that? Like, do you get them on a salary? Do they get like a custom sign up link, and any user who signs up from that, they get like an affiliate kind of percentage? How are you thinking about incentivizing people?
I think that's one of the key things we need to figure out. My personal belief is it shouldn't initially be based on money. Like, I think if you want to formalize it down the road, just I think we'll end up doing that. But I think initially it needs to be because there's value in their collaboration. Like I said, we're targeting people who are interested in building their presence. And so they see value in kind of graying, because we have a lot of customers in their audience ostensibly. So there's value in the collaboration apart from monetary benefits. I think that's going to be really important, especially initially, because if it's just money, well, we could talk about why I think money shouldn't be the primary.
No, that makes total sense. Yeah. I'm curious because obviously this is what we do and this is what the podcast is called. What's your take on founder-led marketing? Because the way that I think about founder-led marketing is almost making your founder or CEO that KOL, right? Like Chris Walker has a massive audience, but instead of channeling that into some third party, he's channeling it into his own company, right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly how I think about it. I think there's two prongs to what I'm working on right now. One is making myself a KOL, and the other one is finding other KOLs. And that goes back to what I said just a minute ago of like, I think part of the reason why I've had success is I've started doing these outreach to some of these early people we're doing these kind of experiments with that you'll start to see is, I'm don't have a huge presence on LinkedIn, but it's like I have, 10K plus followers and my posts get pretty good engagement and I speak to an audience that they speak to. And so my thought process is like, as I have a better presence in the audience of those KOLs, then them partnering with me becomes more interesting for them, because if we create content jointly, then they're getting access to my audience too.
I'm curious, there's so many approaches to, growing on LinkedIn, posting on LinkedIn. You're selling to salespeople, let's say, if that's the main focus. You're the CEO of a SaaS company that's doing conversation intelligence. So do you talk about sales content to attract a sales audience? Do you talk about, conversation intelligence and kind of create content around your category? Do you create more personal content, you as the founder, and what you're struggling with to kind of build like a broad but less specific audience? I'm just curious how you think about that, and maybe any lessons or mistakes or learnings you've already made in your kind of early days here, let's say.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one thing that I've realized is that, at least in our, obviously as you go later on, there's some place where people get outside of our ICP. They're just not target. But I would say on the lower end of our target, a lot of head of sales, for example, they're really interested in a lot of the same thing a founder would be interested. A lot of the early sales hires are interested. So I've actually seen pretty good engagement on my kind of more generic startup strategy or startup leadership content from my sales. So the answer is I kind of, maybe I need to be more targeted and just rip the Band-Aid, but I kind of say there's two things I talk about consistently. I talk about startup leadership and sales, and those are what I try to limit my topics to. And, that might be limiting because there's probably people on the sort of upper end of our ICP, like, a sales manager, for example, that's like not finding any interest in the startup content I'm generating. But for now, it's working, and I get, it's like kind of authentically what I think I have a perspective on. And so I think I think you definitely need to be disciplined on figuring out like what topics you cover, because if you're just shooting from the hip on any random topic on any given day, I don't think there's a reason for someone to follow you. They're like, what is this guy talking about? And unless the content's just out of this world good, I don't think. So I do think there needs to be some focus, but more than anything, I think it needs to feel like you have a unique voice and a unique perspective that's value adding. And so I think that should be probably the guiding principle. And then from there, you can kind of trim the branches to get focused rather than starting with focus out, I would say. It's like, what are the topics that I have a perspective on that's unique and interesting? And then, start with that rather than what topics are we talking about generally.
How are you thinking about, because, given the name of this podcast and our audience, we have a lot of founders or CEOs who might be thinking about this kind of approach, like building a brand on LinkedIn, growing on LinkedIn, running founder-led marketing, that type of thing, but they haven't yet dipped their toe into it. You seem like you have dipped your toe into it. Often the concern is like, will people care? Will people pay attention? Will this really pay off? Does it make sense for me to spend this much time into it? I don't really want to be seen as a content creator or some like random guy posting selfies on LinkedIn, right? So like, how are you thinking about how long you're going to do it, what types of results you want to see, and at what point for you to maybe invest more time into it? How do you justify to yourself as the CEO of an organization to be allocating resources and time here? So like, how are you thinking about running this as an experiment, and what you're shooting for and what you want to see?
Yeah, so I would say a couple things. One is like right now I'm very focused on it, but I did it previously much less consistently and much less disciplined. Like right now I'm literally trying to post every single day. And like I said, I'm saying yes to every single podcast request, just trying to get out there as much as possible. Prior to that, I would post as a way to condense my thoughts, distill my thoughts. Like if I had an interesting thought that I wanted to work through and I was like, oh, this could be value externally, I'd post. And then we had a marketer on my team that was like, you should do a lot more of this. Every single time you post, we see a bump. So he actually like encouraged me to focus on it more. So I would say that, that was like early signal for me to say, hey, this is worth my time. That, and I would also just by posting, I would have interesting conversations. People who, hadn't, or in my network who hadn't seen me for a while would say, hey, I read your post, we should catch up. And then that would lead to something valuable. And so I would say that like, you don't have to necessarily say, I'm going to become a content creator, key opinion leader, and put all your time into that. That there's a lot of reasons why strategically that wouldn't be the highest ROI in your time. But I think that every leader has a perspective and can get value by, clarifying those thoughts for a public audience. Just if anything, just to to solidify your point of view, put that out there, see what happens. All it takes is, again, you're probably not going to see something from the first post or two, but if you just kind of maybe try to do it here or there once a week or 2 weeks and just see, you'll probably, even if it doesn't put you into getting followers and leads, you'll see some probably interesting conversations, reconnection with old people in your network. And, then you can kind of decide to dip your toe into it more. So that's one way I think about it. As far as like what success is we're definitely trying to, I would say, I don't think you can really measure. It's hard to just say. That being said, all I just said is a way to just like try to start getting into and dipping your toe. That being said, if you're doing it inconsistently, you're not going to be able to see like obvious measurable results. So I think if you do decide, hey, I'm going to make this a focus rather than, so everything I just said was about just like, hey, getting over the fear of trying it, just dipping your toes in, building some basic comfort around doing it, familiarity. Then if it's like, okay, I'm going to really push into it, I think then you need to recognize it's going to take some time before you see whether or not it's working. And so the way we're thinking about success is, one, like I said, if I'm getting an obvious increased engagement and presence that allows me to talk to more KOLs, that's a measure of success for us. Two is we've started doing bottom of funnel attribution, as just a way, like as an early stage startup, like attribution is super complex. And so we just decided the easiest way to do this is like when we are talking to customers, asking them just literally while we're talking to them on a Zoom call, how did you hear about Grain? Where did you start to get aware of us? What finally caused you to pull the trigger? And so that's our primary way we're getting a signal on this. We do obviously look at reference sites and all these things, but I think it's really hard to attribute a LinkedIn post or like LinkedIn content directly to a sign up for a lot of reasons. You're a better expert on this than me, but it just seems like as we looked in, obviously we're doing the base level attribution. Like we know where our reference sites are coming from to our landing page, but like to fully capture what is actually happening, I think that's a very limited view. And I think if you measure it only that way, you're probably going to be under measuring. And so that's why we've decided to kind of do this like bottom of the funnel to get an additional signal. And so again, we haven't said we are going to drive this this percent leads by X amount of time. It just needs to be like, do we feel momentum coming from the KOLs because of my increased presence? Are we seeing, an uptick, a noticeable uptick in the amount of bottom of funnel attribution saying, hey, they saw something that I posted out there and how they first became aware of Grain, or what triggered them to sign up? Those are two separate kind of questions in how we think about it. And that's where we are as of now. I think as we go down the road, we'll get more precise in sort of measuring the ROI of my time. I've just kind of said, I'm going to do this for 60 days, push it as hard as I can. And so I think at the end of 60 days, we'll reevaluate, but that's kind of the early signals we're looking at.
So what you talked about there is self-reported attribution. Do you ask people in the sign-up flow when people sign up for a free trial? Is there a form, or is it literally someone reaching out via a call and kind of filling that information into HubSpot? Or how do you make sure you actually capture that information?
Yeah, so there's kind of two ways we're doing it. One is in the sign-up flow. We're just starting to do that. And then the second one that we've been doing a little longer is when people talk to us, because we have different touch points where even though we're product led, we allow people to book onboarding sessions. Oftentimes we'll reach out to new signups that look a lot like our ICP and ask them for feedback. And so if there's ever a human touch point, if they go into support, we ask about it and then we put it into our CRM.
So that's a custom field in HubSpot or something that a person
Yeah,
manually
just
fills out.
exactly custom field exactly.
Do you have do you have any struggles actually getting people to do that? A lot of companies that we work with, if they don't literally put it into their form, let's say demo request form, you have that form in there, and you just say, "Hey SDR, I want you to ask this question on every sales call and put that information as accurately as you can into this HubSpot field." Like a lot of the time, they just don't because they have their flow, they have the questions that they used to. How do you make sure that it actually happens?
Maybe because I'm focusing on it right now, and if I see them and I'm looking at the data a lot on HubSpot. I mean, again, this is maybe depending on who your audience is, maybe not relevant. But as the CEO, I mean, everyone knows my eyes are on this, and so I've seen pretty good.
Putting the hammer down. Okay, makes
Yeah,
sense.
following up in a Slack channel publicly does wonders as the CEO. Hey Ben, I saw that this field is empty and it's been empty the last 3 calls. Just a reminder, this is really important. We get this data.
Yep, yep. No, makes sense. Okay, so it needs to be a priority, and when it's a priority, it gets done.
And again, I think that once I don't know if we're going to programmatically do this forever. I'm just saying right now, well, this me as the CEO, I'm spending time trying to figure this out. I need reliable, fast signal, and this is just a quick and dirty way to do it. And so again, I don't know what it looks like long term, but that's working well for us right now.
And when you say, you're currently focused on this, like in your head, like what are you willing to allocate to this? Is this like 30 minutes a day? Is it 3 hours a day? This LinkedIn, hopping on podcasts, putting yourself out there.
Yeah, have you heard of the top goal framework? It's like, I mean, it's basically like it's just a simple idea, which is at any given point in time, you have your top goal. Like, what is the most important thing that makes if I get it done, makes my day a success, makes my week a success, makes my month a success, and just being very clear, this is my top goal. So right now, this is my top goal. And when I say this, I mean figuring out the KOL motion and making myself a KOL, my top goal. And then I try to dedicate 2 hours a day to that.
Cool. Given that you're clearly invested into it and you're allocating a lot of time to it and you're willing to kind of make it work, what were the things that you saw maybe beforehand that made you believe, okay, this is worth me spending time on? I know you mentioned, hey, your product team maybe said, hey, we saw a spike whenever you post sporadically, so keep doing more of that. Was there any concept or person or something that you saw a CEO say that you said, oh shit, yeah, no, that makes total sense and that's why I should be doing this?
There was a lot of things that kind of came around the same time. One was, like I said, this was a few months back, is we had some goals for our conversion rates and our NRR, and we kind of hit those goals. And then I have a strategic advisor who just kind of helps me as an executive make the best use of my time. And we basically decided, okay, to get the business to grow, what's the way I think about building a startup or building any kind of company is like, what is the next bottleneck to your growth? Like, what is the thing that's preventing you from growing more? And then the CEO needs to go focus on that next thing. A good metaphor I heard about this is like, where are the kinks in the hose? It's like, find the kink in the hose and then unkink it, and then go find the next kink in the hose and unkink it. And so it became obvious to me that like the next kink in the hose was top of funnel. And so then I just started reading about it, looking what's out there, and just putting my attention on that because I knew I needed to figure out top of funnel more. And when I say top of funnel, like I mean market awareness, bringing people to our landing page, a go-to-market channel. That's what I mean by that. So that became a priority, and then I started reading about it. But I'd say, so there's a number of different things. I had a conversation with somebody at Nevadic that's doing this really well. And I had because I know them pretty well. They were in my YC batch. And so I talked to them and their head of growth. And so they did it really well. I had a conversation with Tango. Tango is doing this really, really well. And then I actually listened to this really great episode from Chris Walker on his Revenue Vitals podcast, where he talks about KOL strategies. And he said something in there, I'm trying to remember exactly what he said, but just where he talked about his own business that he's able to drive from his own presence. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was like shocking. And I was like, oh man, that's a great asset. Like, I want to build that asset.
I had him on the podcast 2 weeks ago and I asked him,
I listened to that episode, by the way.
You listened to it?
Yeah. I think so, right?
He said that he brought in 10 million in net new revenue in 2022 and 2023. So 20 million total through his personal brand. So this is like people self-reported saying Chris's content, Chris's LinkedIn, Revenue Vitals podcast. And so we calculated out on that podcast that the average SDR quota is maybe 400K a year net new revenue. So he basically brought in 25x.
He's like a 25x SDR. Yeah, crazy.
And it keeps scaling, right? That's the crazy thing. One, he's not doing it full time. He still runs a company mainly, and he does this content thing on the side. And two, there's no reason why he can't become a 30x, 50x, 100x SDR over time as he keeps growing his audience, right?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, he's not even, I would say, capped at all. Like he's probably a mid-level influencer right now.
Yeah, I'll have Adam Robinson on the podcast next month, who is, I don't know if you've seen him from retention.com, crushing.
Yeah, he's one of like I have this document that I've called my thought leadership strategy, and in that document I have like my influencers. I used to be a musician and in a band, and we used to always think like, who are your musical influencers? And so it's like I have like these are my my thought leadership influencers, and he's one of mine.
Yeah, he's crushing right now. I'm curious, and maybe you already answered it. You said, you made that switch from focusing on the product to focusing on go to market. What was the thing that you saw in the business that made you say, okay, now is the time to switch?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned earlier it was basically just conversion rates essentially.
Are you able to share what conversion rate or NRR or something you guys were shooting for?
I don't want to be too specific about it, but it was basically like there's a couple of ways we were thinking about it. One is like benchmarks for similar types of products that were given to us by our investors and our strategic advisor. And the other ways were what makes our whole business work, because, we have some assumptions in our sort of business model around like, how much it costs to bring traffic to our website, how much what our margins are. And so we kind of just were like, if we're bringing people into a leaky bucket, we shouldn't spend time on that. And so we kind of had like some targets to kind of make our essentially LTV to CAC look good. Essentially, is a way how we thought about it. Do you know what I mean by that? I don't know the.
Yeah, no, total. Yeah, interesting. And so makes sense for the KOL strategy and making yourself a KOL. Are you experimenting at all with live events? I mean, that's the Chris Walker playbook, and we're seeing that it works for customers, right? Where you do a weekly live event, you bring an audience, you turn that into a long form video for YouTube and a podcast, and then from there you get your video snippets and text posts for LinkedIn. Is that something you're thinking about, or it's just like banging out one LinkedIn post a day?
I was not thinking about it, but I was just on a really cool live event. Bilal, have you ever heard of Bilal? He's like a sales influencer who does kind of SDR content, and I was just on a live event that he did where it was actually really cool. Your audience might find it interesting. He basically brings on a guest, builds an SDR cold calling script with the guest live, and then does live calls through a dialer, and then like pilots the script live and like works it out it's really actually awesome. We got like 5 calls answered, and we kind of saw how people reacted to it, and what landed, what didn't land. And, how it was super awesome. And so I was on that event with him, and we saw some good response to that. So that kind of got me thinking about it.
That is brilliant, because one of the hardest things with these live events is to actually drive a live audience, because they know they can just listen to the recording. So what's the point of showing up live? And obviously, I think this drives retention, right? Because you show up, he does your script live, he experiments with you. And then the next week you spend experimenting with it in your own business and running with it. And then you come back with your findings and like, let's iterate on this, here's the objections that I'm getting, what can we do about it, etc. So
exactly. Yeah. And it's kind of fun. He like asks his audience to like help with the cold open and like different parts and give feedback. And he does a good job. It's really good. It was a good show.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Cool. Let me see here. One question maybe to wrap up. What would you say right now with top of funnel, with go-to-market being your priority, conversion rate, NRR, that's all in a solid place. What are the metrics that you're currently paying attention to and looking at?
I mean, the standard SaaS metrics, right? NRR is super important for us. We have an expansion metric because we essentially, as a PLG product, we get a 1 or 2 or a 3 or a small team to convert, and then that account expands. So expansion is important to us. And then ACV is like our average ACV is a very important metric to us. Conversion rate, and then website land visits, and then website conversion rates. Those are kind of the main sort of like stack we measure essentially. And there's some other kind of more detailed activation and activation retention metrics we look at based on kind of how we measure sort of what an engaged user looks like in our product.
Right. What would you say are the resources or people or books or podcasts that help you or helping you the most right now with your, LinkedIn go-to-market KOL type of strategy? Anything in particular that you can point people to?
Yeah, I would say that one is going and finding people who are doing it really well and seeing if you could talk to them. That's been tremendously valuable. I mean, obviously, maybe everyone is not in a position to do that, but I feel like this is a new enough. Obviously, it's been around in consumer for a long time, but I still feel it's relatively a new way to think about it in B2B, that there's not like a lot of really sort of canonical content to go to. So kind of people who are actively working it out in real time and able to talk to them saying, this is what I'm seeing. What are you seeing? Did you try this? It has been really valuable. I mentioned Chris Walker, he has a couple good episodes on this that I found pretty useful. There's a handful of folks I've just been following on LinkedIn that are talking about this that I've found useful. Those are probably the main ones. I wouldn't say I haven't really found a book that I've been like, this is amazing.
Right. I mean, there's Founder Brand by Dave Gerhardt, kind of.
Yeah, I was going to mention, I listened to Dave Exit 5. Yeah, I listened to Exit 5. He has a good podcast. And so I listened to his podcast, Dave Gerhardt's podcast. I have not read his book. Maybe I should check that out. Do you recommend it?
I have not read it. I've only skimmed it. It's good. It's actually Adam Robinson talked about it, that was the thing that inspired him to like go all in on LinkedIn.
Well, then I should read it. There we go.
um, who else is on your short list right now, or of CEOs or founders that you're watching who are crushing this type of thing besides Chris Walker, Adam Robinson, anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, there's like some people there's people who are, like I said, because I've been focusing on as I've been focusing on kind of maybe the tier down than the ones everyone knows. So there's a couple people on my list that are like, these people are doing a really good job, even if they're not like as sort of fully built out as Chris Walker or some of the other people. So one person who's actually doing really good that I just think he's really on point is his name is Guillermo Blanco. He runs a company. He's one of the co-founders of a company called Reach. And he's just really doing a good job. It seems like he's got incredible engagement, really great content, like good job sort of engaging with his audience. And, even just like one thing that I saw that he did was really funny is he like makes humorous content, like jokes for his audience. So he's doing really good stuff. Sounds like you already talked to him. There's a few others that I could shout out that are doing pretty well.
Yeah, give shout outs.
Yeah, there's a guy named Nate Nasrallah that's a co-founder of a company called Fluent that I think does a really good job and has great presence, engaging with his audience and doing like audience relevant content. There's another person I mentioned, Bilal. Bilal kills it. He does a really, really good job. Yeah, I think there's a couple of bigger ones. Like there's a guy named Christian Kraus who does a really good job. Yeah, so there's some shout outs.
Cool, man. I'm gonna let you go. This was awesome. I know we kind of ended up nerding out a lot about founder-led marketing and all this stuff, but I guess this is the name of the show too. So,
well, what else should we nerd out about? It's like better that than Dune. We could have talked about Dune coming out this week. I don't know.
Oh my God, yeah. Maybe I'll bring you back if you're down in like 3 or 6 months, and you can share some of the kind of progress that you made or learnings there, because I mean, this is literally what people are working through here. So yeah, your links in your company will be in the show notes too. So if anyone's interested in checking you out on LinkedIn or your company, they can check that out below. And with that, thank you for joining. Any last words for the audience? Anything you want to leave them with?
No, it just was really fun. I had a great conversation. I'd be happy to come on in a few months after I've, I think it'd be fun for me to do a retrospective and hold myself accountable as I've declared that this is something I've been working on.
Well, let's put a stake in the ground. Where are you going to be in 3 months? Like followers, let's say.
My followers, some nice little vanity metric there. Okay, so right now I'm at 10,700 followers, above 20,000. That's my goal.
Above 20,000 in 3 months, you're going to double?
I'm going to do it. I got this.
I mean, okay, that's good. Got to be ambitious. I love it. All right, Jeff, thank you so much for joining.
All right, thank you. Bye.